realized when I was on the plane to California yesterday that I said I would do all top 6 LPL team videos before the playoffs on the 14th. Or at least I said I would like to. So I have 3 teams left to do this, and it's currently the 10th. Playoffs start the 14th. So I said I would do Snake, LGD first because they're kind of the teams that have been figured out. Vici Gaming and Vici Gaming are on the rise, and then OMG and EDG have been projected pretty much all season to be the top 2, whether or not you agree with the standings at this point. Vici Gaming, for me, the identity of Vici Gaming is the team that doesn't fight. You're in LPL, a region prized for their team fights over their rotational play, and then you have this team that doesn't fight. I said that last year that team was kind of LGD, but Vici Gaming has really taken this concept and perfected it. Informing how this happened, we have to look at their history. Initially, when I was thinking about doing the Vici Gaming history section, I didn't think I'd have that much to say. Carrie, who's a very young player, doesn't have a very extensive history. Hatong has had a kind of an underwhelming career. There's not a lot of ups and downs there. It's not like this epic story. I'm sure that in of itself is an interesting narrative, right? Vasily, most people know his backstory, so I can say some stuff about how he was before he was in LCS, but he was mostly a substitute player, except for playing eHome, and they played, and he had actually a pretty decent relationship with PDD. Like, if you know anything about PDD, they were friends for a while. PDD constantly wanted to bring Vasily out to his teams, sometimes against regulation, but other than that, there isn't a lot of tidbits that I can give about these Chinese players that people might not know from other sources. So I wanted to maybe gloss over the history section a little bit, but then I decided that Vici Gaming's history of roster decision making is actually very informative in terms of how they play now within the LPL, because I said that they can't really fight. They don't have necessarily the star carries. They've constantly lost like strong carry players to other teams, and they might not be the most phenomenal carry players, but then in trying to make LPL, they've lost to those teams with the players that they lost, right? They've done that at least twice in their history, and then when they got into LPL finally, I thought they made an actually really questionable roster decision that I think could make a really interesting storyline now. Going into the next split of LPL, because one of the players they dropped has just qualified on their sister team, right? So that's an interesting aspect of Vici Gaming's history, and I think that it has created the style that they had, that they've been forced and pigeonholed into the playstyle they have now because of the roster decisions they've made in the past. So let's start in 2012. The League of Legends team forms. Vici Gaming has a history in Defense of the Agents. Going further back than that, they're actually very close to the LGD organization, so similar kind of idea where they pick up League of Legends teams in fall of 2012. The gaming houses are actually right next to each other. If you go to visit Vici Gaming or LGD gaming houses, that you can find them next to each other. Organizations are fairly close. They picked up Koreans at similar times from the Samsung organization, followed parallel paths, except that Vici Gaming has been stuck in outside of LPL for 1 year longer than LGD. Let's begin then with their initial roster. They actually had Wayless, right? I mentioned LGD. Wayless used to be one of their star players. They had SMLZ, a star carry in the secondary scene or the amateur scene because there was no LSPL at the time. But they had TGA, which was a very big, successful tournament. You had regional qualifiers to get there, and then you got to the regional qualifiers through open qualifiers. There's not a whole lot of this challenger ladder climbing thing. Raw, you guys may have recognized him as the jungler for M3 at the start of the split. They've gone through 3 junglers. Now, he used to play top lane for them. Rui is probably the last player that you might recognize if you're familiar with LPL. He played as the support player for Royal Club during 2013 spring before Top 8 came back. Players XTY, DGC was their jungler. The end. This roster is okay. And again, throughout this history, throughout this time, Vici Gaming starts almost making LPL, because 2013 spring is when LPL starts. 2012 summer is, fall is when the team is formed, so you get the idea that they're created to sort of aim for LPL, to aim for this league. They placed 4th in their TGA summer, which would have qualified for the LPL 2013 summer, and this is one of the first times when they lost Raw to Rising Stars. They lose to Rising Stars in TGA. Raw is playing top laner at this time. Later, they placed 2nd in TGA Winter, so they actually qualify in this tournament. They first was LGD. They qualify for the promotion tournament, the same promotion tournament to LPL that LGD qualified for, except that they lose to Energy Pacemaker. Energy Pacemaker just blows through this tournament. People thought Energy Pacemaker was going to completely bomb out. They had a terrible 2013 LPL summer, but they beat out most teams. Young Glory bombs out, and LGD and Energy Pacemaker end up going to LPL. Gaming and Young Glory go to the first ever LSPL 2014 spring. They lose SMLZ. And SMLZ is actually handpicked, tapped by the WE organization. They've already picked 2 extremely successful AD carries, Wei Xiao and Name. So it was a big deal, okay, to get tapped by WE as an AD carry. And not only that, but he was picked as Wei Xiao's hand-picked disciple. So this was the narrative around SMLZ at the time. Vici Gaming, I'm guessing at the time they didn't have a lot of funding because this is when they're starting to lose players, and maybe their focus is probably more on Dota. They let SMLZ go, and he goes to WE Academy. But actually, their roster isn't bad. Okay, so they pick up another AD carry who has a lot of, I guess, hype, a lot of narrative surrounding him. This AD carry is now known as TnT. He's been previously known as Fish, Quiet, Avenger, Ash, Sins, Mez. He's had more name changes than pretty much any other player in League of Legends that I know of. But right now he's known as TnT, so we're going to call him TnT. TnT, if the name is familiar to you, he just recently qualified for LPL in Xiaogu, so he'll be in LPL next year unless he's replaced, which is definitely not out of the question. But he had probably just as much mythos at the time in terms of LSPL or secondary league AD carries as SMLZ, STYZ, these other rising Chinese stars, so to speak. Part of it was that he was previously in LPL. He played for LMQ. Cecilia was on the bench, and he was credited with actually carrying that team. Like, no one was really impressed with No Name or Xiao Xiao, or especially not Yao, their top laner, and more. But people really liked this guy, and they said that he was the reason why LMQ avoided relegation. So he's a pretty decent AD carry for this split. Like, okay, we lost SMLZ, potentially Wei Xiao's disciple, but we picked up this other very good guy who initially Royal Club was willing to move UZI to the mid lane and put him on their roster as an AD carry. So this is a pretty okay, decent move on paper. They get carry joiner, and they get Eimy. They still have Wayless, and this is a pretty good roster, right? Overall. So it's not bad, except in LSPL 2014 spring, they lose to WE Academy. WE Academy, Young Glory, plays 1st and 2nd. They get auto-promoted to LPL. Vici Gaming places 3rd. So they, again, just barely miss it, and they lose to someone who took one of their star carries before and then had success with him. After Vici Gaming places 3rd, because LSPL 2014 spring is known as kind of the spring of LSPL top mid laners, where there are a lot of these rising mid laners with a lot of promise. We had, in the previous summer, we had these rising AD carries. We had TnT, we had SMLZ, we had STYZ. I already listed all of those, and now we have the rising mid laners. We have Wayless. Xia was on WE Academy at the time, who's known for his really good laning phase. You have Jiangun, who switched from top lane to mid lane and had a lot of success making like these ridiculous dives, doing all these. He actually had more deaths when Young Glory did go to LPL than any other mid laner, or any other player, frankly. But he always made these crazy plays and he'd get away with these things, and in a way he was like the UZI of mid lane. Then you had Wayless, who I mentioned. also known for making some of these hero plays, but definitely I think has a more sophisticated farming minion manipulation style overall that develops over time. And finally, you have Cherish, who's on a team called SPG. The only other player that's really notable on this team is going to be their support player 300. Vici Gaming just lost a bunch of their carries, or I guess their mid laner. They still have a pretty solid structure for a team, but they don't really have a good support. They merge with SPG, they create two teams. One is known as Vici Gaming Stars, and one is known as Vici Gaming Potential. To set up the narrative between these teams, this is kind of a funny story, because Vici Gaming Stars had all the talent on it, and Vici Gaming Potential, I can't. It's just meh. Like, they have this okay top laner, also called Rory, not to be confused with the support player that they had called Roy, who was the only salvageable player from the Vici Gaming B team that they had previously called Vici Esports, which just, I think they placed dead last in LSPL spring 2014. So they pick him up. They have a player called Maelstrom Mao on AD carry. They just, not really a whole lot of notable players that you might have heard of otherwise. But they have all the stars and Vici Gaming Stars. And this is where they make one of their most, like, this is where the roster decisions just get really perplexing. Okay, because they have these substitute players called Zun and Bobo. Okay, you're following me, right? Zun and Bobo, like, Zun can play Kassadin, okay, he's overwhelmed just fine. You have Bobo, also just fine, can play Lucian. So there's kind of some OP champions at the time that they can play and they can do well. And they look okay in those games. Like, they're not bad, but they're not, relative to Cherish and TnT, they're just mediocre. The team also has Tabe as the coach, so they make some of these smart vision control, they make the smart rotations like Vici Gaming Potential and Vici Gaming Stars, though they have these really weird rosters, and you're wondering, why is Cherish on the bench? Why is TnT on the bench? Is like TnT just some toxic piece of cancer? Like, why do he keeps Royal Club drops him, LMQ drops him, like, now he's benched on Vici Gaming. Where does this guy go? Why can't he catch a break? What is wrong with him? People say he's got a lot, like, maybe they just don't want him to be like the SMLZ or the STYZ who eventually gets into LPL or eventually plays without like a good support and then just falls on his face. Maybe they don't want the illusion to be dispelled, so they just never let TnT get back into LPL after his really good run on LMQ. Maybe. Okay, I have no idea what the issue is with TnT. It's really perplexing to me. I'm excited for that reason to see him in LPL on Shogun next split, just to see, like, he probably won't do that great. I mean, whatever. But it'll be really interesting just to see this finally fulfilled after so long. And then they still have Carry, the top laner, Eimy. So these are going to be, and then 300. So these three players are going to be your primary carries. It's like this mini version of Vici Gaming as they are now. It's like the training ground for Carry in terms of how he fits in this team. Carry has to continuously have ribbon banned against him. Eimy, really strong player. A little bit, like a fun fact about Eimy, he's now qualified again for LPL through Vici Gaming Potential, because they put him on that roster just this past spring, 2015. He used to be on a team called CC Club, and CC Club's only claim to fame, okay, was knocking OMG out of one G League qualifier, and then everyone thought they were going to be really good, and then they weren't. But Eimy was a good jungler, really solid Chinese jungler. He's always been like this carry style jungler. I really think, unlike a lot of these other players, I think he's going to be one of the rare ones with all the hype and all the excitement around him who is going to get into LPL and succeed. Like, I think we have this idea of Eimy and 300 boosting carry, allowing him to take the game through LSPL. Funny story, they placed 9th. Esportspedia says Vici Gaming Stars placed 8th. They did not. They should not have been invited to expansion. Actually, Vici Gaming Potential places 8th in LSPL. Neither of these teams really should have had a shot at LPL if it had retained its only 8-team format. They would not have, but the top 6 teams after the first 2 who auto-qualified, Team King and Team Snake, who are now in LPL, these these other top 6 teams, 2 through 8th, were invited to the expansion to play against W Academy and Young Glory for 4 spots. W Academy makes it out. Vici Gaming potential, actually, if SPG decides to go away from Vici Gaming, maybe because they're completely screwing up their rosters, I have no idea. And they take some of the strong players like the Cherish away. They end up taking 300 back, right? Vici Gaming Stars takes the 8th place spot into the expansion. So they're the 8th place. They're not even the 8th place LSPL team. They're the 9th place LSPL team. They should not. They had no reason to do well in this tournament. It looked like a harder group just because Young Glory did better than WE Academy in LPL, and people thought that maybe they'd finally get the roster together. The thing about Young Glory is that they never scrimmed in LPL. They didn't really. Sometimes they would have these miracle runs where they 2-0 EDG, they 2-0 WE, they 2-0 OMG, but those were just based off pretty much luck. Vici Gaming Stars beats Energy Pacemaker Carries, Energy Pacemaker's sister team. They lose to Energy Pacemaker. They get the 2nd spot in that group. This team is carried by their top laner and their jungler. Pretty much the, like, Zun, whatever, Bobo, whatever. I don't even remember their support player's name. Like, whatever. Doesn't matter. These are the only 2 players on that roster that mattered. So, you think now the Korean exodus is happening, Chinese teams are starting to pick up these stronger players, like, okay, at the time Imp was supposed to go to LGT, maybe. These other ideas started popping up. We heard about Def, we heard about Pawn. Maybe Vici Gaming can get some really good players, okay? They can get a decent Chinese AD carry, or a decent Korean AD carry, they can get a good support. Maybe they'll grab like a Chinese mid laner from somewhere. They can maybe go back to SPG, say please, like, let us have 300, we'll try again. Something like that. They replace Eimy with DanDy. Now, people think that I'm probably crazy, that I drink this Kool-Aid, and I actually am crazy enough to think that Eimy is better than DanDy. I don't think that at all. No, I know DanDy is miles ahead of Eimy. I think Eimy is a great player. Within the LSPL context, he's able to carry. Now that he's carried Vici potential into LPL, he's able to carry 2 teams into LPL from LSPL. That's a pretty good accomplishment, all things considered. But he's not DanDy, okay? And this past play, he played well against Swift on a couple occasions. So he has tested himself against some of these high-level junglers. But he's not DanDy. I'm not saying that. This is remotely. That's irrelevant. The point is that you have this roster with these 2 star players as this core. Build around them. Get players around them. Players that can take the load away from them. Don't replace one of them and then, okay, maybe from here they can still savage the roster. I mean, I don't want them to replace Eimy. I think Eimy has definitely shown that he's deserved to be an LPL. But maybe they'll get a good Chinese mid. Like Mata is obviously a very good move because they needed a good support player. And of course Mata and DanDy, like, their synergy is really strong, so maybe that's something that will keep this roster together, allow them to do well on LPL, and they can get a good Chinese AD carry, a good Chinese mid laner. The thing that happens now is that Hunter, the CEO of Vici Gaming, is sure they're gonna get Cool. Like, he comes out of Weibo and says, well, Cool's really close to signing with us. Cool isn't gonna sign with Vici Gaming. And of course at the time I was actually, like, I say that now, hindsight is 2020. I was, oh, maybe Cool's gonna go. I mean, we were both kind of fooled, I guess. I think everyone was kind of fooled because Cool and OMG and those 3 core players, they're OMG, going, Cool, Loveling, I mean, even Sand to an extent. They're kind of lifers, right? But they wait until forever and they don't really have a backup plan for Cool if that falls through. So they end up with having to choose between Hitong, who was on Vici Gaming Potential, and they still retained him in the organization. Xuan, who is from Vici Esports, like the 16th place LSPL team I told you about, and Zun, right? It's not a good choice. It's never going to be a good choice. You can maybe pick up Solo Q Star or something, but that's definitely going to be a gamble. They pick up Vasily. I don't want to rag on Vasily too much. I don't think he's a terrible player, but like within the constant of Vici Gaming, he's only started to improve because he stopped playing like a carry. He started playing like a janitor player. He started playing like a steelback. Okay? Like, you think about Fnatic, steelback, really, really strong support within his region, carries him through lane, has the mid laner and has the top laner and mid laner do a lot of damage in team fights. He picks up the kills at the end. Yeah, okay. Janitor type player. Vici is a janitor type player. The team needs carries. They got rid of their carry jungler for DanDy, who is a carry jungler, so that's good. They have their top laner who's a carry, but they don't have a mid laner who's a carry. So they need probably another damage threat, another carry source, but they get Vici, who can either like go super ham and get caught out, or play a janitor role. The reason I'm upset is because people are saying that Vici Gaming is the second best team in China right now. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I think that their playstyle is very smart, and I like how they play a lot. I think that there are teams with good players in every single role in right now, and these teams are Edward Gaming, OMG, and Invictus Gaming, and Vici Gaming isn't one of those, and that's why I get upset, because if people are already saying that this team with these relatively mediocre mid lane and AD carries, and let's face it, like, carry is a top 5 top laner. He's not even like a top 1 or top 2 or top 3 or top 4 top laner. He's probably the 5th best top laner in LPL right now, and he only looks like that because DanDy is like constantly camping his lane. So he probably isn't even a 5th best top laner. He probably just looks like that right now. Now imagine for a second if instead of DanDy they had Eimy. If instead of waiting for Cool, they got a relatively decent mid laner. They got Cherish. Maybe they went to Edward Gaming and they say, I hear that you're benching this really good Chinese carry who is probably the most consistent mid lane player in LPL last year. I heard you benched him. Okay? Can we buy him? Like, can we have him? Like, we want a mid laner who can clear some lanes. What if, instead of Vici, they got Imp instead of DanDy, okay? And because they kept Eimy, they got Imp, okay? And they had this really good, already proven Korean bot laner. Korean bot lane with Imp and Mata. That team suddenly looks really phenomenal. They have like this top laner carry. They've got like the wave clear mid. Like EDG actually has pretty low transfer rates on their players. Like they let Name go for a relatively low transfer rate because they've said that they just want their players to succeed. So if you get an offer from another team, he wants to play, he could probably just go. Like this is a no-brainer. AD carry, Imp, Mata, really strong Korean bottom lane. They already have this really good communication. Like Imp can play this carry ham role where he gets a lot of kills, he just blows people up. GD, let's say if instead of TBQ, probably the worst jungler in LPL right now, they had DanDy, okay? And then they retained XQ, and again, I'm not saying XQ is better than Imp because Imp has been playing like actually pretty phenomenally. XQ is just good. Like he was probably one of the better AD carries last year in LPL, and he obviously had PYL with him, so that maybe inflated his laning phase a little bit. Let's say that they had XQ PYL still retained, they had DanDy, and then they had Acorn, and then they had Wayless. So suddenly, look at this, like this, I did this one little move, and maybe you don't even get you. Maybe you stay with Hitong, and Hitong just plays really safe, and he just still clears ways. It's still not a bad team. Like suddenly you have, like Hitong isn't the worst mid laner, like TBQ is the worst jungler. Suddenly you have these 5 really good teams with pretty good players in every single role, instead of just 3. Just say, obviously this happened for a reason, okay? It's so simple and it's so straightforward, and we can't really necessarily blame Vici Gaming for this. Probably DanDy and Mata were a package deal. Problem is that this is just one more roster move, and this line of roster moves that Vici Gaming has made. And maybe we'll get a good mid laner. Maybe we'll get the AD carry to change. Maybe Vici's fine. Maybe they just need a janitor AD carry and they can get like another playmaking mid laner. And maybe carry will improve because carry improves like noticeably with time because he's just a really young player, and his biggest problem right now is just this decision making error, and this will improve with team communication. Also, it will improve with like him playing more and more the game because maybe this will happen. And it'll all work out, and Vici Gaming will be like a monster of a team and able to contest with Edward Gaming, because that's why I get upset, right? Because if Vici Gaming is the second best team in LPL right now, again, debatable, Suddenly, if you replace these players, you allow them to play more than the style that they're confined to and that they're pigeonholed to because they don't have carries, they can't really teamfight that effectively. You have a team that can test EDG. It's simple. Like, can we do this? Maybe? Fix it? But I don't have that high hopes, again, just because of Vici Gaming's track record for unfortunate or poor decisions, or losing their carries, or this happening here and here and here, and maybe they're getting more money, and getting DanDy and Mata as a sign that they're investing more into their League of Legends team than they have in the past, so I hope the roster moves will improve. Oh, and one more thing, now that Vici Gaming Potential has qualified for LPL, we actually get a light version of what would be that roster. Assuming the roster stays the same, which it probably won't. They'll probably upgrade some players and roles that don't need to be upgraded. I mean, might get benched again, whatever. But they have Lil, who's like another carry style top laner, that he'll play more variety of styles because he doesn't necessarily have to carry his team. They have Schwan, who I mentioned, the mid laner from VGA Sports. He's actually there because they had a different mid laner at first, and it didn't really work out. And this is actually a good thing because Schwan is willing to take more risks and make more plays, so he's better at being a mid game bridge because they didn't really have a mid game carry. They had a couple late game carries, and really the only team that I've seen work with a lot of just only late game carries is EDG or Samsung Blue, and I don't think it works as well. It probably works better now because of the patch switch, but it didn't work at the time. And then they have the Samsung bot lane, right? Except Scatch, Samsung substitute AD carry, and Heart. So it'll be interesting. Eimy's Revenge, anyone? No, they're not that good. They're not going to be that as good, but they showed some surprising results. I don't think anyone expected them to take the game off of Xiaogu in the LSPL finals. That storyline is pretty good, and I hope that they can do well enough to make it worthwhile. Now that I've spent the last 27 minutes complaining about this roster, I will tell you why the team itself is very good, and why people project them to be second place team in LPL. Whether or not you agree with that, there's actually a very valid point to be made about that. It starts with how they started to play initially, because Mata and DanDy continued to play as if this were Samsung White at first, which it's not Samsung White. First of all, Vici's playmaking quality isn't going to be as strong as Imp's. Their top laner is called Carry My Team, not Looper, not Teleport when Mata tells me to, not play Singed when I don't know what else to play, not have a really crazy overperformance at Worlds. That's not carry style. And their mid laner is not going to be Pawn. He's not going to be safe regardless of what you do. He's not going to be able to play champions that suit the team and mesh in this kind of way, initially at least. Tom doesn't do terrible his first week, obviously. He actually solo kills Pawn, speaking of, because they play Edward Gaming first week, so Tong does solo kill Pawn at one point. They lose lanes pretty much across the board, though, to EDG, to OMG, and Vici actually gets dove by Deft and killed. This is the first time anyone's ever seen Deft play as if he has a laning phase, right? So initially the response was, wow, Vici is like really bad, but it turned out Deft was just starting to perform really well now. To try to team fight their way back in, that doesn't work that well. DanDy's team fighting shows a lot of great dimensions. They start to transition more until DanDy tries to carry people through lane. Like, Tong is kind of bleeding gold halfway through the split. He either overcommits in lane and gets killed, or he does really well in solo kills. Like, he tries to make these plays, and it doesn't work out for them. Vici tries to make these plays, and sometimes it works out for them because Mata is a really good support. This sense that Mata isn't super invested in the team initially. He doesn't seem to want to peel for anyone on the team right away, except for DanDy in fights. So he'll peel for DanDy in fights, but he'll kind of let Vici and Carry and Tong do whatever they want and just go to their deaths and start them like, I'm not peeling for that. Because Mata has had a reputation for tilt in the past, people said that it's tilt. That he's overcommitting on these wards, he's killing the wards when he shouldn't be, he's flashing after these hooks that he's going to get, but he's going to wish he didn't get them. They're repeatedly trying to go for this Baron, trying to fixate on this Baron. Mada's shot calling is just not as crisp, not as good looking, and I start to call the team DanDy's Ducklings because Carrie and Hatong start to develop over time, and there's this really interesting game where they play Fizz and Zed, and they just follow him around the map, and he finds these places for them to get picks. So in your head, you have this idea that DanDy and Mada are like the parents of the team. And DanDy probably maybe were the parents of Samsung White, and Mada says, I really don't like these children. I thought we had sent the other ones off to college. I thought we were done with raising kids. Like, why did this happen? And DanDy says, no, they're good. They're learning. They want to learn. We can teach them. They won't be as good as our last kids, but they might be halfway decent kids until... Okay, this analogy is not working out for me. Mada also has that incident where he's fined $8,000 for trolling for picking Jace in Demacia Cup when Invictus Gaming 3-0s Vici Gaming. Aside from Mada being perceived by the community perhaps as being a little bit crabby, you still see these elements of team play that Vici Gaming is trying to work out how they want to do this. Initially, Mada and DanDy try to go for the same vision control style, and there are a couple of problems with that. First of all, if your lanes aren't winning, it's really hard to go into the enemy jungle and invade and put down these wards. It's not as safe. If your lanes follow, then the lane that's ahead is obviously going to kill you, right? The other aspect is if you do put these wards down and you can't coordinate or communicate with your team as effectively or execute as effectively how to get picks off of this vision, there might be instances, for example, where they put the vision down and then they say, okay, Hatong, go in and kill that guy. And Hatong just gets killed by the enemy jungler. Like what are you going to do with that? You can't do anything with that. Instead, they start warding less. And Mada spends some of this gold on maybe getting Mikhail's to keep Vici safe as he starts to come around and they make out this deal. Okay, Mada says, I will be the parent of one of them. You have to take the other two, okay? And gets the Mikhail's, starts helping Vici out in lane. DanDy, meanwhile, on the other hand, starts buying more gold so he can get tankier faster. He can be more lethal faster if he plays in Italy, and he starts to camp Carrie's lane, and they execute this skirmish style with the top lane and getting Carrie ahead. Hatong stops freaking out, calms down a little bit, starts playing more of these wave clear mids that I was talking about, like the Twisted Fate has been a good pick. Victor has been a good pick with in the bottom lane. Mada and Vici have picking these really, really, really strong lanes, like super steroid strong lanes, with the Thresh and Lucian or the Thresh and Graves. So this forces teams to make this choice: do we want to do the 2v2 with Mada, or do we want to lane swap? And then if they lane swap, they're really, really good at executing the lane swap. Mada's really good at freezing. DanDy and Carrie will camp top so that Carrie gets ahead. Carrie has like a very relaxed laning phase, can sometimes get a ridiculous amount of farm over the enemy top laner. If they do go for the 2v2, like Vici and Mada are going to dive your towers with their really strong 2v2 lane. Eventually, you're manipulated into this case where Carrie is probably always going to get ahead. The lane in the mid is just being held, and then bottom lane has some kind of lane lead through either starving or diving or getting kills. At this point is when Hatong becomes more of a factor because he plays this split push Twisted Fate, or the split push Victor, or whatever he plays. He's going to put a Lich Bane on it and just direct around the map. Whenever a team makes poor rotational decision, they just get a free tower to accumulate early leads without ever really fighting you head on, aside from getting these picks, because Vici is the assassin. If he gets enough of a lead through Mada's tutelage, if Mada can get a pick, then Vici can eliminate someone with some of his burst. After they get this ridiculous kind of lead and they can rotate to the objectives in this way, then they'll fight you. Okay, they'll only fight you with a stupid lead. They'll only fight you when your front line is broken and bleeding because they got like 2 CS the entire first 15 minutes of the game. They'll only fight you when Vici has so many kills that it doesn't matter if he dives into 5 people because he'll kill you anyway. Then they'll fight you, and they'll kill you, and they'll win the game. And that is Vici Gaming. This is when I'm going to start proving my points by showing you footage from an actual Vici Gaming game. And to look at the pros and the styles to run down the good parts that I just went over, I'm going to show you a Starhorn Royal Club game from this week. The reason why is because I want to use recent videos that are patch relevant, but there aren't a lot of teams that still care. Like, even the EDG set, they weren't really playing their typical EDG style. It was really sloppy. They played like these no damage comps. It was kind of a disaster. But Starhorn and Royal Club, both of these teams still very much want to win at this point. So even though Starhorn Royal Club gets steamrolled, and this isn't an even matchup at all, it illustrates what Vici Gaming does well. And they've done this to Snake. If you go and see Monte Cristo's VOD review of Snake versus Vici Gaming, you'll see a very, very similar game. So I feel like this is still representative of what they do to some of the top teams, even if it is Starhorn Royal Club. To start this lane swap scenario, you can already see Starhorn Royal Club Cola getting bullied by Vasily as he holds this wave really well. Mata set this up. He went back down to accompany carry in this case. In this instance, because Name is eventually forced to swap back with Cola, Vici Gaming immediately transition and they grab this dragon really early on. So this is already a free objective for Vici Gaming. After getting some additional picks, they know because of the ward placement in the upper brush that Starhorn Royal Club is going to transition to start farming the jungle. Vici Gaming pull their resources to the bottom side of the map, knowing that the waves are mostly pushed out on the other sides. They bully Starhorn Royal Club away from their own turret, and they manage to secure this very easily and extremely effectively. Here, DanDy is farming his camp. They're going to do another very similar flank where they bully people away from the camp. They know that because Carry just pulled out that top wave, that Cola is tied up. So they're able to just go in on this turret, flank it very successfully, and take it out, just because they know where the waves are, where the members are. In this case, this just illustrates the Vasily is the assassin pattern, because if he has enough kill and enough gold, like Zero overextends here, he gets caught by there and just blown off the map. Here is where Vici Gaming fights. They have so much gold. Starhorn Royal Club's front line is very far behind, but they're still extremely sloppy. And this is the point that I want to illustrate, is that they're not the best at fighting. Like, some of those abilities were executed poorly, like Carry overblew his ability trying to get at Name and couldn't get at that black line. So because of that, they lose some of these kills here. But still, because they have so much gold, it doesn't matter, and they just brute force you, and they tear you down, and they do end up getting this turret here as well. Now to talk about how does one go about dismantling Vici Gaming. How do we not just lose the lane swap? How do we manage to deal with the freeze? Jungle Fall works well. Diving, just rotating top and fast pushing the turret to make sure that they can't get the freeze. So bringing more people works okay. Pushing out the other wave really well and reversing the swap, which Starhorn tried to do, but they tried to do that way too late. And it depends on how teams handle lane swaps and how they react. OMG doesn't react to lane swaps well. Snake doesn't react to lane swaps well. IG reacts pretty well. LGG depends on their top laner they're running. And then EDG, of course, do handle lane swaps much better with like their roaming Chinese Mafia. That's their answer, is you just dive their enemy top laner. You take your top and you dive their top. This isn't about gaming. The point is that there are ways to deal with this. And then the early roams, the early grouping, is kind of how LGD dealt with Vici Gaming in their recent match, and it's really stupid to use this set because these aren't good games. And I'm trying to scrape because I'm trying to use patch relevant footage, but because we're talking about Vici Gaming's weaknesses, the fact that they lost this game to this really troll composition, executed certain things well that counter Vici Gaming. They had good team fighting and outplaying early on, and that put Vici Gaming behind, even though Vici Gaming came back taking some of these objectives. The other aspect that I discussed that I kind of glossed over is that Mada's late game decision making as a shot caller probably, and it's a team collective. Sometimes Carry blows an ultimate late game, they lose this fight that they shouldn't lose. Mada might overcommit on dragon calls, they might say we're going to end this game, but they don't have time to end the game. And they lose late game to a really, really weird call like that as well, like a massive throw. So we're just gonna look at these two clips quickly. Start of this fight, a counter gank goes terribly wrong and TBQ kills DanDy. The Vici Gaming responds with a kill onto Imp after both teleports are burned. Unseen Predator allows TBQ to get away, and this is like Vici Gaming chases him out, but he gets the Dark Passage out of the way. And this is where Acorn, who farmed to the last second and got level 6, really pays off. He flashes in, he manages to get a 3-man ultimate, and the burst just completely decimates Vici Gaming early on. From here, they can't really pick anything else up because the juggling of aggro there is like actually pretty poor. And then Carry gets taken out, and there's not really a whole lot they can do. DanDy tries to go in for the outplay and the assassination, but he's by himself. This is just where Godby completely outplays like DanDy at the end with the Kassadin. A back leading up to this allows LGD to make a superior rotation and get Baron. Vici Gaming tries to respond with a trade on the inhibitors, but they split, and because of empowered recall, LGD immediately backs, and then Vici Gaming just scatters. Like, they could, in theory, hold and fight and maybe split so that LGD can't win off of this, but they don't. They just scatter, and LGD completely demolishes them. Obviously, going into the base, they were already split, so it didn't work out for them. But again, it's just really weird. I can't really explain some of the decision making that happened here, and LGD wins with their terrible composition. Outside those examples, obviously the best way to deal with it is to prevent yourself from getting in this situation where you have to lane swap, or where you're thinking about putting yourself in a disadvantaged 2v2, where Mada has this kind of playmaking champion. I would actually target, in a ban phase, I would target Thresh, or I would target Janna in some case, like early pick Janna, target Thresh. That's why the PYL Mada matchup is so interesting, because those champions get banned away, picked away all the time. That prevents him from picking this champion that has so much lane control and makes you think, I don't want this 2v2. You can also ban Lucian or Graves and pick the other champion, and that puts Vici in a position where maybe he picks the Urgot. In the Urgot late game, you can stall out and you can just deal with it late game. Just again, take your top laner, dive bottom, maybe take that tower, get some of those early objectives. Do a fast push strategy. This is why OMG, in some respects, could match up well against Vici, because OMG loves to do the fast push. They love to group and take the towers, they love to do that sort of play potential. But they suck at lane swaps, like they're awful. So if they don't do that, if they don't think to react in that way, then they're gonna get messed up by Vici Gaming. Now, being a fan of this team, obviously there's the funny storyline of Mada and DanDy trying to adapt to they're really doing that, like this is really our team. Like, actually really respectful in interviews. DanDy did something along the lines of, after one of the wins when Vici Gaming started winning, he said, we want to take games off of OMG and EDG to get our top laner more MVP points, because again, like with the big KDA, if you get a lot of kills, if you do a lot of dives, it doesn't matter, they won't give the MVP to DanDy and Mada, but they'll give it to Carry, because MVP points in LPL are really weird. So that was the joke. He said that he gets along well with Carry. Mada says that he gets along well with all of the Chinese players. It's a fun team. They're kind of an interesting group. The fact that they're not that great, but individually, but they're able to find the style that counteracts poor roster making decisions. And that's all I have to say about Vici Gaming. Of course, if you like the video, subscribe. I will try to get the OMG and EDG videos out before playoffs. OMG probably will happen. EDG, if not, I'm expecting EDG to go to MSI, so maybe I'll wait until after playoffs for the EDG video and release it for MSI.